Welcome back or welcome to the Strides with Graywolf podcast. I'm your host, Nate Reich. You are here because you believe disability is an inability. This podcast was created to tell Olympic and Paralympic athlete stories on the road to Tokyo and beyond. Today in episode 20, we have Akeem Haynes on the podcast. Since my introduction to Akeem a couple months back, I've been closely paying attention to all of his content. It seems like Akeem has done everything from NCAA athlete, professional athlete, two-time published author, motivational speaker, podcast host, mentor, and businessman. Without further ado, welcome the ever so insightful Akeem Haynes to the Strides with Graywolf podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Man, it's a pleasure, man. What an introduction. What an introduction, man.
Well, first off, I usually start the podcast by asking, who is Akeem Haynes?
Man, first thing that comes to mind is a man of God. Um, Everything that I've been able to accomplish has not been my works alone, because the reality is I am not that talented. I am not that gifted. I am not that smart. My words come from Him, and everything that I've been able to accomplish, I'm just a vessel, man, and I try to use what He gave inside of me to the best of my ability, whether that's on the track, football, any sport that I was involved in, and in my everyday life, man. So I'm a man of God.
Yeah, love it, love it. And how did track and field and football come into your life? Some people have it in the family blood. Like me, I had a couple of professional athletes in my family, and it's like I grew up at the track. But how did those two sports come into your life?
Man, so originally I started playing football in the ninth grade. Kind of an introduction to it, nothing too crazy. But I actually started doing well. I made an all-star team in the ninth grade. I broke a bunch of city records in community football. And that's when I started to think, this could be an avenue for me, a path that I could take to making my life better in some capacity. I didn't know what that looked like. But when I got to high school, I started to notice that, what? I can get a scholarship from this, right? So I started to dial in a little bit more. Not that I wasn't dialed in before, but I'm a person where I don't need much motivation to keep going, to keep focused, to keep disciplined. My life has brought me to that point where I'm a person that I know I may not get a second opportunity, right? So I know that I got to capitalize on the first one to the best of my ability, as best as I can. So in the 10th grade, man, I started playing football a lot more, started getting recruited to some aspect of it. But then how I got into track and field, my coach in football said, Akeem, if you run track and field, you'll get faster for football. A 1+1 = 2, you know what I'm saying? So that made sense to me. So that's kind of what I did, but I didn't really take track and field too seriously, right? I went into my first high school track and field. I think I ran like 11:05 and like 22:07. I didn't really know what those times meant, man. I didn't really care, honestly. But then I realized that this is an opportunity where I could actually be a dual sport athlete, which means that it would be hard for a school to say, what, we don't want you, right? Because if you're good in football and track, then it's hard to turn that away. And so that's kind of where it kind of happened for me, man. So I kind of started taking both at a serious level, taking it seriously in the 11th grade.
Awesome. And then all of a sudden that led you to community college in Kansas, to a pretty powerhouse track and field community college. How did your journey lead you there and then to the University of Alabama?
So, man, throughout high school, I was one of those cats who wanted to do every sport, right? So I actually played basketball, I played football, and I ran track, and I tried to do all of them. In the 11th grade, my track coach said to me, he was like, bro, he's like, basketball and football and basketball and track, like, they don't mix. I'm like, what do you mean? Of course it mixes. But really, when you sit back, you think about the basketball schedule is usually in the fall, right? And you're working towards it. But then what about the indoor season for track? So they actually don't go hand in hand, but football and track does. So I got some good offers from my top schools at the time when I was getting recruited was Florida State. Um, who else was it? Florida State, Mississippi State. But I had signed my letter of intent to go to the university, to go to Florida State. I was going to play football and run track. So what happened was how I went to junior college at Barton Community College was I had been so dialed in academically to get myself high enough to accept the scholarship. So I got to a point where in the 12th grade, everything felt like it was starting to line up and it was going smooth. Then one day, the Florida State coach said, Akeem, we got a problem. I'm like, what do you mean we got a problem? He says, man, one of the maths that you took in the ninth grade, the NCAA didn't accept anymore. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, you're actually ruled ineligible, right? So even if things would have went well, every single thing would have lined up, I still wouldn't have been able to go to Division I because of that rule that happened in the ninth grade. So it was out of my control. So I went to went to Barton Community College, not by my choice per se, but because that was the next step. So when I got there, I didn't really know too much about, a junior college. I didn't really take too much. I didn't really do any research on it, right? I just trusted what the coach at the time, Ken Harden, said, and what my high school coach said. Just went there. So when I got there, it was about August, and in my mind, August, September, October, it's football time. So I called my coach. I was like, Coach, I'm here. I know we got track a little bit later, but who do I get in contact with about playing football? It was like, football? Yeah, football. It was like, man, the football team, they got discontinued like 1980 something. I was like, oh, okay. And then at that moment, I said, you know what? I guess I'll focus on track. So that was kind of the backstory behind that.
And then when you got to
But
Alabama, oh, sorry. No, keep on going.
yeah, so then once I got there, it was kind of a second chance for me. Junior college was very tough. I went to Barton Community College, one of the a big prestigious track and field powerhouse. Like who, if Veronica Campbell went there, Bernard Williams went there, Tyson Gay went there, Alonzo Edward went there. Like the list goes on and on and on and on and on. But it was kind of a second chance. Like the reality is, you go to junior college with one sole mission, well, two sole missions: to get your schooling, get that taken care of, to run fast. But you don't go to junior college to stay. You go to junior college to get out. It's tough. It's hard because there is nothing there. Bart, put it this way, man. As I've told you before, the most exciting thing about Great Bend, Kansas, to me, is Walmart, right? So that kind of says enough. Nothing wrong with Walmart. I like Walmart, but there should be some other things in the city to do, right? So I knew that when you go there, you got to stay focused. Otherwise, you're going to find your way to be distracted because you're looking for fun. You're looking for something else. But when I went to Barton Community College, my sole goal was to do everything I needed to do to get out of there. And so I did that my second year. I made my first Olympic team that year. I became a junior college All-American. I became a national champion. I became one of the top sprinting recruits in the country that year, and it was able to get myself to the University of Alabama.
Then when you were at Alabama, did you ever think about playing football? I mean, obviously they have one of the best football teams in the country, and Nick Saban does like track and field athletes. So did that thought ever cross your mind?
Yeah, man. I had some discussions, and when I talked to my coach and when I talked to some football representatives at the time, they kind of said, you know what, like we already got our team kind of full on the football field. And it's tough to have a full scholarship one and then try to get that with another. Usually schools don't like to share too many scholarships. And so for me, I just didn't really see the of letting my athletic scholarship go for track and field and trying to get one on the other part. Right. I think it's kind of easier if you're a football player and trying to come over to the track side, right? Because usually a football athlete has a track and field background. So the switch is kind of easier. It's a lot harder for them to want to give money to a track and field athlete uh, trying to play football. But I think if it's the other way around, it's a little bit easier. So, you know, at that time, I just said, you know what, I'm here for track and field. I'm going to focus on track and field, and I'm just kind of set football aside for a little bit. So that was my main focus there. I wasn't really too focused on playing football there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you shared your story at the CAP Summit with us, and I really connected with it because I remember you talking about some things that happened when you were younger, I think around 7 years old, that were really tough things for a kid to see. And for me, getting paralyzed when I was 10 years old and seeing people die in the hospital, I really connected to seeing things that not necessarily a 10-year old or 7-year old can really should see. How did that shape your career? Because you've faced adversity and had to lean into adversity, pretty young.
Yeah, man, I think that's a great question, man. I think as you know, a testament for yourself. Like you're here today for a purpose, right? Like you're here today for a reason, right? Like God doesn't let us go through certain situations without something behind it. So for me, man, at a very early age, being born in Jamaica, the place where I grew up, there was 99 deaths in that area alone. Um, and during that year, it was the third highest death rate, right? So there was two other cities that were more, and so I saw violence early, and it looking back now, at that time, man, I dealt with a lot of mental things. When I saw the situation that happened, I developed a stuttering problem, right? Like I could barely put sentences together, man. So for a greater portion of my young life, like I wouldn't say anything, right? I would just observe. And it kind of showed me at that time, like I learned skills that sometimes in certain positions, you got to be able to just listen. If you can listen more than you can talk, it'll make you seem like you're a lot wiser than you are. But it's partially because you're not saying anything. So for me, man, I learned how to listen, not by choice, but because I developed the stuttering problem. Um, I had to learn confidence because I think certain times and certain positions in life, when something happens to you that is out of your control, you're forced to learn skills to find balance internally. And so I had to learn a bunch of these different things because of what I went through. But at the same time, I think what we go through in life serves a purpose, even if we don't understand it right away. Right now, I'm able to speak and I'm able to use words because I know the power of words. But I've had to train all of these things that seemed like it was making me seem a little bit insignificant. Our defaults, our weaknesses, the things that people see and they say, "Wow, I feel bad for that person." I never really think from a person looking at it from our perspective, we don't feel bad for ourselves. We just use the strengths. Okay, so what? That happens. It happened to us, but what can we use here? Right. So I know that I had to train certain things in me to offset what happened early in my life, whether it was the death that I seen, whether it was the homelessness that I faced, and all these different things. I had to do things that trained me mentally to be able to withstand it. I know, and as you know, that doubt and fear, joy and happiness cannot all dwell in the same house, right? Because when they all dwell in the same house, they're all going to bicker, and it's going to be a lot of heartful conversations. But I think that we have to be able to give ourselves what we need. But I think over time we learn to fill the gaps of what we're missing. So everything that I've been through in my life, man, I have just learned that if it didn't break me, it's building me and creating me to be able to be who I need to be, but also leave message and intangible steps of hope for those coming behind me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great message. And I connect with that so much because after I got paralyzed, I started really bad and I had a learning disability. And so I really connect with that. And obviously, you've had many speed bumps throughout your life. And for me, my brain injury was the best thing to ever happen to me. And a lot of people look at me very confused when I say that, because I say it allowed me to live for the first time. And
Mm.
is there a specific event that happened in your life that really set you up for further success?
Man, definitely 13 when I was homeless. I think 13 was a big year for me. Um, because when I was homeless at the bus stop, man, that day, it was just a normal day. It was me going to school and coming home, something I've done every single day for that past year, right? Like for the past couple of years, when you go to school, you expect to come back home and you expect to be able to shower and expect to be in a bed and all of the same things, right? Like that's what's normal. But that particular day, I did the same things, but the results were different, right? And so in that moment, I realized one, the strength of and the power of gratitude. But I also remembered, like, man, like there are so many things that we go through on a daily basis, and we can take that for granted, right? Like coming home, we can often take that for granted. Like being able to get to where we need to get to in one piece, like we can take that for granted. And when something is comfortable, we can take comfortability for granted, right? So at that age, man, I realized that the strength of gratitude, but there was also a moment when I was playing football. Um, I had normal day. I went to get a checkup, and the doctor said that they found something in my heart. It sounded like a murmur. It sounded like there was a hole in my heart. And after I got that news, I was sitting on the steps, right? And my mom came out and she said, Akeem, what are you going to do? And without even thinking too much into it, I said, you know what, Ma, I'm going to continue to go to practice. I'm going to continue to do what I was going to do, um, because I knew at that moment how I handled that situation right there was going to say a lot about how I face adversity. It wasn't about the football. It wasn't about playing the sport. It had everything to do with how I was going to mentally equip myself to face trials and to face tribulations. Because how I handled that moment right there, something else was going to take its place on a bigger scale down the road. And if I didn't handle that opposition accordingly, then it was going to messed me up mentally for what was going to come down the road, right? So the same situation with you, how you handled your journey back mentally was going to say a lot about how you handle opposition physically, right? Because if we can get ourselves mentally equipped for what's to come, then physically our body will do what it's supposed to do. But we got to get ourselves there mentally first. And so for me, man, I think it was those two moments, being homeless, learning gratitude at that time, and when I couldn't play football, but I decided that every single thing that my teammates could do, I was going to do. So I went to practice every single day. I ran like they ran. I caught passes like they caught passes. I did everything that they did. I just did not play a single down of football that day, that year. But I still showed up as if I was going to. And I think that moment right there, uh, put something inside of me that says, you know what, Akeem, every single day, regardless of the outcome, you have to do whatever it is that you said that you were going to do, regardless of what happens. That says a lot about a person's character rather than it says about the hard work of a person. And so for me, I always wanted to be a person of character rather than just a person of talent.
Yeah, and I mean, it seemed like you just weren't taking no for an answer too. I mean, it's like people ask me like what made you think you could walk again? And I'm like, what do you mean? I knew I was gonna walk
Mm,
again. Like there was no if and buts about it. And our mothers seem very similar. And my mom, yeah, there's no way I wasn't gonna walk again. At least that's what we believed. Um, and did you find that throughout your life that you're like, I'm just not taking no for an answer?
yeah, man. I think at certain parts of our stages in our lives, doesn't even have to be sport, but I think at the beginning, at least for me, we try to prove people wrong, right? Whether it was a teacher, whether it was a coach, whether it was opponents that we face were like, man, what are you talking about? Like, there's no way that you're gonna tell me what I can't do. You know what I'm saying? But for me, a shift happened when I stopped trying to prove people wrong and started trying to prove myself right. Right? It became more about, you know what, Akeem, it don't matter what these people think, what these people think that you can't do, but what do you think you can do? What do you think is possible for you? What do you want to accomplish out of your life? And so I wasn't worried about what people were saying anymore. I was so focused on what I believe was possible for me. What people thought was crazy seemed possible and ideal for me. So I fed into that because I knew that the ups and downs of life, people are going to be with me sometimes. They're not going to be with me sometimes, but I was going to be with myself all the time. So I just made sure that everything that I did, I believed it in my heart of hearts. And if I believed it in my hearts of hearts, and I was going to do everything in my power to try to make whatever it was a reality. But the shift for me happened when I stopped trying to prove people wrong, and started trying to prove myself right, man.
Yeah, that is so powerful, and I completely understand that. And now let's go back to your track and field career. You finished up at Alabama, and then you went out to run professionally at Altus, which is kind of funny because that's where I grew up, and my mom trained
In Phoenix.
there. Yeah, so I grew up in Chandler,
Wow.
Arizona, but my mom competed for sky vaulting, which was coached by the same coach who coaches pole vault there for Altus, actually, which is kind of funny. But how is that transition for you to Altus in Phoenix, Arizona?
Yeah, man. So when I got from Alabama, my last year, it wasn't the best year. I was battling some injuries. I was still an All-American that year, all SEC, but it wasn't what I thought it would be for me. I was just having a tough time battling with injuries. And so the coach at the time, still the coach now, is a guy named Stuart McMillan. Uh, Coach Stu, I think whenever he's ready to step away from track, he will be uh, one of the greatest biomechanics instructor that there is. This man is extremely smart, extremely knowledgeable in biomechanics as a whole. And so, but I knew him years ago when I was in Calgary. My high school teacher at the time and coach Ken Rose is good friends with Stuart McMillan. They kind of they got a good relationship, and they kind of kept in touch over the years, and through different things. But Stu at the time, before these names were household names now, he coached a lot of the bobsled athletes. Steve Messler, who was part of that four-man bobsled team for America that won gold, Kaylee Humphreys, and so many other names. So I used to train with those guys as a 15-year-old, right? So I was actually getting introduced to what professional sports look like, even though I didn't care for track like that at the time. So when he was in Phoenix, he called me in my last year and he says, "Man, I'm out in Phoenix now. I think you should come out here." And at that time, I was trying to figure out, do I want to continue running track and field, right? And so I said, "When do you need an answer by?" He said, October 4th. Well, I gave him an answer like October 3rd, right? Because I was trying to figure out how I was going to financially be able to get myself there and live there. And so when I went down there, man, for the first couple months, I stayed on the floor of the place where I was staying with my roommate. I sat on the floor there. I had a sheet, I had a pillow, and every single day I just made up my mind that I got to go to training and I got to train hard and I got to make the most of this thing because this has to work. So I didn't go into it like, I hope this works. I'm like, no, this has to work. Like something has to give. So my first year there was just a grind, man. I had to get back healthy, battling injuries. That year, I didn't actually start sprinting on the track until December, and we started training in October. But there was so many things that I had to work through. I had to work through a sports hernia. I had to work through groin pains and quad pains and body alignment and all of these different things that I had to work through. But I had to be patient. But every single day, man, regardless of how I felt, my mind, I just pushed my body as far as it could go. And probably to some extent, that probably didn't help all the way as well, too, because you got to understand the fine balance between the two. But my first year, man, it opened up a lot of doors because it was that time that I became the third fastest Canadian to 60 meters of all time when I ran 6:51. And some doors started to open up and some opportunities started to come my way. But my first year in Phoenix, man, to sum it up, was just a grind. It was a grind. And it was 100% betting on myself because I did not have a lot of support. I did not have a lot of help. But I knew that as long as I was here, as long as, God was still keeping me alive and was still keeping me here, then I knew that if nobody has my back, I knew that he did. So that year was just a grind, man. It was just a grind and just doing everything I could to create something. And I was glad that I did.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, the first thing that came to my head when you were talking is one of your messages where you talk about hope isn't always the loudest voice, and sometimes you just need a little bit,
Just
just a little something to hang on. And I was listening to your hope message today, and I mean, I got tingling sensation going through my body, and just how authentic and how true that message is.
Man, I've never been a person to give fluff, man. I don't believe that you should read something in a book and talk about it as if you know it. If you haven't lived it, it's two different things, right? So every message that I've been able to share is something that I needed as well too. Sometimes it's just a reminder for myself, right? And I think so many times I'm a firm believer, and I said before, man, that hope needs to be shown and hope needs to be seen, right? And there is somebody who is always watching. Somebody is always watching to see how you're going through what you're going through. Because they seen Nate running and walking and talking and still doing all these different things, they are going to see that regardless of the limitations that people put on them, because they seen you, they're like, man, I can do it too, right? And I think everything that we go through is much bigger than ourselves, right? And so for me, I always remember that because even during the toughest times of my life, toughest times that I go through on a daily basis, when I feel the spirit of heaviness coming upon me and discouragement and all these different things, I say, you know what? I have to find a way to push through today, not tomorrow, not the day after that, but to push through today because we have enough strength to control the battles of today. It's just when we create days that aren't even here yet that it starts to get a little bit heavier. So for me, every message that I share and I give is a message for me and something that I've been through, right? Our life experiences is what is going to help someone else, right? So whatever it is that we're going through, man, it's here for us to go through it so somebody can gain strength.
Yeah, and I know in a lot of your messages you talk about having a why, and that's something that I just recently kind of went through in my life, finding a why and why I'm doing this running thing. And I'm sure COVID might have had a effect on creating that. When did creating a why come into your awareness, and what was your why when you were competing on the track?
Man, my why probably came in, um, when I came to Canada. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth, man. Everything that I've ever been able to accomplish has been a fight. To this day, it's a fight. The saying, they always says, um, there is what 10,000 hours to mastery, or you got to work twice as hard as. I always felt like I had to work 5 times as hard as anybody else, right? Because what came easy to others did not come easy to me. Didn't even fathom in my head how it could work out in certain ways. But I have always known that with a strong enough reason behind something, a person can push through any storm. And so when I think about my why, man, I think about, my family before me. I think about what I'm trying to create for my family timeline after me. I'm trying to think about the legacy that I want to leave, not necessarily for the world. That's not as important for me. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I want to be a good um, influence to those around me, but our legacy starts with our family. Our legacy starts with what we leave behind for them? What do they think of us? What do they see hope? What do they see as possible? And a lot of the times as people, what we see possible first is what we see around us. And that's usually the people who are in a closest circle and those things like that. So I always thought of a why as something to aspire to leave behind that's bigger than yourself. And so, man, when you come from nothing, you got to remember that and to use that. And so I always remember that, and on the track, I think I just wanted to make sure that every time I stepped on the track, that I was going to give my best effort towards it, right? There are so many times, and I've seen it from working with professional athletes and athletes in general, and seeing different environments. Sometimes people step on in their respective field and they're just going through the motions. And you shouldn't do that, right? Like you shouldn't just be going through the motions. That means you just don't really care like that, or you shouldn't do it. So my why on the track just mirrors what I was going through in my life. I was going to work twice as hard, 5 times as hard, 6 times as hard to get ahead. And you best believe I was going to do the same thing in the track. I knew that I could be one of the best, but I knew there were certain things that I needed to do that. So my why on the track in my life, they kind of both go hand in hand, man. It's hard to separate the two for me, right? Because I'm the same person on the track as I am off the track, right? That same energy, that same persona, that same perspective, that same goal, that same mission, that same Navy SEAL type mentality and attitude. That's the same thing. And so on the track, man, I just wanted to make sure that Akeem showed up every single day in competition. I wanted my competitors to know that regardless of what shape I was in, that you weren't just going to come and get an easy win. You were going to have to work. Like don't come in thinking you're going to have it easy today. So I just wanted to make sure that everything that I did represented who I was on the track or who I was off the track.
Yeah, yeah, I mean that's great. I go at it a little bit different. I do have a ultra ego when I kind of hit the track. For me, I like to be kind of vicious in my mind kind of when I hit the track, but I
Yeah,
think it's
absolutely.
always so intriguing to hear others and how they actually got to that success. And I think for me, success and failure has just evolved so much in my brain. Having 8 professional athletes in my family, I always was like, oh, winning. Like that's what success is. And
Yeah.
really, it really changed for me after Worlds. I won Worlds and it didn't feel any different. Like I didn't feel good, but the best moment was hugging my coach. And I was like, listen, as long as I know that I worked my butt off to get to that point, and I just need to enjoy the process. What is your definition of success and failure? And did it change a lot, over your high school, college, and professional career?
Um, well, man, I think success is relative to each individual. Everybody's version of success is different, right? But I ultimately think success is consistently, relentlessly working towards something that you think will bring you joy, whatever that looks like. Um, my, I think sometimes, man, we put so much emphasis on failing, right? Let's even go back to when we first started, like learning how to tie our shoes. We didn't get that right away. But as kids, we didn't think about that. We just, oh crap, we got to do this way. And we just adjust and we just adapt and we just do it, right? And so for me, I used to carry not failure, but losses to heart, not because it affected me so much, but because it affected those who invested in me. So when I didn't win a race or didn't win a football game, it it hurt because it felt like a personal attack to those that invested in me. So I felt like I let them down, not necessarily me, but I'm just like, man, like I let these guys down today. I let these people down today, man. Like Akeem, what are you doing, man? Like you can't be doing that. You know what I'm saying? So I would take that to heart. it was a good factor, but also probably wasn't the healthiest thing mentally. Absolutely not. You got to find the balance between uh, letting things go and using things that'll get you better. And I learned that along my years. To one thing that's going to help everybody is learning to have a short-term memory. Doesn't mean you forget about the loss. It means you take the lessons from the loss, take the positive, and use it to make you better and to progress. So whenever I think about failure, man, it took probably till 2015 when I started to not let the failures or the losses, I didn't take it to heart as much. Because when I took it to heart, I sat with it and I carried it. As you know, running with a positive wind is a lot easier than running with a negative wind. And when I was holding on to the losses and the heaviness, it felt like I was carrying a negative wind every time I was stepping the blocks. Those are a disadvantage. So um, for me, man, I try not to let failure get to my heart or to my head. I try to be even keel, right? I don't get too high, I don't get too low. But when things do happen, I try to stay graceful in between the valleys and the mountains because, as you know, man, the up and downs of life comes at you quickly.
I know, and patience is with athletes sometimes doesn't come in buckets. Sometimes it's
Yeah,
few far in between, and we want success or whatever we view success so quick, but a lot of times it happens when we least expect it.
absolutely, man. I've even like realized like, and I'm sure you know too, like there are some races or some things you get into and you may cross the line. You don't know the clock yet. You don't know whatever it is, and you're just like, it just wasn't good. It just wasn't. It wasn't good. But then you look up, and the clock says different, right? Sometimes the things that we force and we want the most doesn't exactly grow in the way that we want it to, right? But learning the balance of the fluctuation of how life works sometimes. My best races to this day are the ones when it just came. Like I wasn't when I ran 651, I didn't even want to run indoor that year. I didn't want to run indoor. When I ran 10:0, I was like, whatever. I didn't even want to come down here and do that. So all of these things, I didn't necessarily want to do that. But then I can remember so many times where I was chasing a time and chasing speed and it just never came. I got slower. Right. So I think you got to find the fine balance between working hard, working too hard, uh, letting it come to you, and you trying to force it in.
Yeah, yeah, that is so true, and it's funny how sometimes those moments where or those workouts where you don't pay attention to your watch or you're just running off feel, and those are sometimes some of your fastest times. Today I was doing some 200s, and I was like, oh, that was
Yeah.
definitely a 27. Looked down, I was like 25. I was like, oh, okay. I was like,
Yeah.
all right. I'm not as slow as I thought I was today, but I would love to dive in and as I talked about, 2019 for me was a really fun experience going to worlds and such. And how was winning a bronze medal at the 2016 Olympic Games for you? What was that experience like, and what did you take from it?
Man, 2016, that Olympic experience was definitely much different than the first one in 2012. 2012, I was 19 years old, 19, 20 years old. It was a experience for me. But now, it's 4 years later and I'm a little bit more experienced. I've had a lot more life experience, race experience, and the whole magnitude is just different, right? Because now we're expected to do well. I ended up going and running the 100 um, and the relay there. The 100 didn't go so well for me, but I knew that I still had a second opportunity. And so when you are in the midst of greatness, man, it's hard not to rise to the occasion. Right. And so when you're warming up and you're seeing, Bolt, you're seeing Asafa Powell, you're seeing Justin Gatlin, you're seeing the Americans, you're seeing the British team, CJ Chichindu Uja, you're seeing OJ, you're seeing all these different guys who, you compete against. Um, you have you only have two options. Either you're going to rise to the occasion or you're going to succumb to the pressure. And so I knew that the 100 for me was done. I would have loved to become Olympic champ in the 100 meters. I would have loved to make the final, all these different things, but okay, that didn't happen. But now you have an opportunity here to not only win a medal, but to do something that Canada has not done in quite some time, right? And we had the squad to do it, right? You're talking about because our order was me to Aaron Brown to Brendan Rodney to Andre DeGrasse, and Andre was already having a phenomenal games, right? And 2016, our relay depth as a sprint nation that year was we were on fire that year. Our slowest guy was running 10-1. You know what I'm saying? So in that time, I knew we had a special year. So when we got into the call room, I always say, man, I think most sports is like a big poker game, right? Whoever plays the best hand, whoever plays the best face, because everybody is a little nervous to some extent. Everybody is battling that sense of doubt. You're still confident. You're still confident, but there's always that doubt that says, what if this doesn't go like this? But in the call room, man, we were confident. We were laughing. We weren't necessarily putting any pressure on ourselves. We knew what we were going to do. We knew what we could do. We knew it was going to be fast because we saw the heats and we saw 6 teams under 38 seconds. I'm like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous. That's fast, right? So going into it, going out to the call room, man, I don't even think we said anything different to each other. Literally just give a head nod and then it's on. So once the race came, once I went, I knew Aaron was going to get out. I just wanted to give my team the best position and give them a little bit of lead. And so I was able to do that. And then I just sat down and just watched. It was out of my hands now, right? I get to watch my teammates and I get to watch them do their thing. So when we crossed the line, man, we crossed the line and we saw we were fourth. Fourth place sucks. I'd rather be seventh place than fourth place, right? And it's one of those things where we're fourth, one of the highest finishes for Canada at Olympic Games. We broke the Canadian relay record. So there was some constellation there, but nobody felt like we did anything, right? But then once things shifted and we got the bronze medal, everything, the air became a little bit easier to breathe because whenever you get to a major championship, as you know, what do you want to do? Obviously, you want to run a fast time. You want to jump far. You want to jump high, but you want to come away with the medal. That's what's important. So when we got the medal, I remember saying to myself, I'm like, man, we did it. But I wasn't just saying we from the sense of my teammates and I. I was saying we from every person who invested in me, right? So the we was for, man, I'm so glad that I'm able to do this, but I know that it wasn't just me alone that got me here, right? Whether we realize it or not, there is someone who is praying for us, someone who's sending us positive energy, someone who is mentioning our name in a positive way that we know nothing about. So that, for me, after I got the medal, man, I went and I shared it with every single person who invested in me, whether they said hello down the hallway in high school, whether it was a teacher that reached out to me years after. Man, I went back to my first city that I came to Canada with in Yellowknife, and I spoke to 9 schools in 7 days because I knew that this medal was a representation that was much bigger than myself. Man, the medal sits in my closet, man. Like I hadn't even looked at it like that, right? But every time I do, I see people. Maya Angelou has a quote that says, I come as one, but I stand with 10,000. And that resonates so much with me because whether I'm on the track, I'm on stage, they may see Akeem, but there's a bunch of people behind me, right? A bunch of people cheering me on, a bunch of people who invested in me. So at that moment, man, when I say we, I'm talking about from 2 perspectives. Yes, my teammates, our names will always be synonymous together because of what we're able to do. But away from the track, man, there was a whole bunch of people who was on that podium with the team.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly takes a village, that's for sure. You know, like we said at the beginning, you wear a lot of hats. You are a busy, busy man. Following your Instagram kind of makes me tired sometimes. I'm like, man, this guy's going all over the place. And can you share what's kind of coming down your stream in the next couple months, and if you have any projects coming up?
Yeah, man. So, I'm, I try to, I think there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. And so I think so many times earlier in my life, I've tried to be busy, but busy doesn't always mean efficient. So I try and be productive with everything that I'm doing. And I just try to make sure, man. I think with COVID happening, I had a lot of speaking gigs that were moved, that were canceled. Um, so I'm not traveling as much as before to go and speak. So a lot of things, man, I've had more time to sit and to do other things. Have I started this thing called Fearless Speakers Academy, which is coaching young speakers into coaching or into speaking their message. Because when I first started speaking, man, I did not know what the heck I was doing from a business standpoint. I never had a problem delivering a message, but I didn't know how to necessarily make money from it. I didn't know how anything to do that. I had to learn the business and all these different things. Last year, I started an event called Starting from Scratch, which was my first event. It actually happened like 2 weeks before COVID got really serious that we knew about, and the lockdown started happening. But that in itself was tough too, because I've never planned an event before. But I knew that the reason why I wanted to have the event was much bigger, so I had to go through with it. So in the works right now, man, I'm working on a starting from scratch a virtual experience, putting that together. Hopefully, it'll be all done and live next month, and that'll be something that I think is, it's going to add a lot of value to those who take the time to listen and to be a part of it. Um, as far as projects, man, that's probably the main one. Season 2 of my podcast is coming back next month. Some Yeah, man. I just I try and make sure that when my time is up here on earth, man, that God says, you know what, you milked everything that I put in you to do, right? And I don't want to be one of those people who are sitting on the couch or sitting looking out when I'm older and saying, you know what, I wish I would have done that. Now, it's important to be calculated about what you're going to do. But Nate, man, I just don't want to have any regrets, man. I want to make sure that everything that I'm a part of, that it's 100% Akeem, it's 100% me. I'm not going to tell you something that I haven't lived. I'm not going to produce something that isn't a story of mine. I'm not going to tell you a tale that I've never lived. So that's kind of what I have going on, man. But definitely starting from scratch, virtual experience, man. I think that's going to be something that I think is beneficial right now during this time.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I really love about your content, at least for me personally, is that it's very thought provoking. And I'm someone who likes to kind of take some time to myself every day to kind of just think through the days. And I, I love being able to listen to one of your videos and then sitting kind of in my room where it's dark and thinking about, how that impacts my life and just the awareness around that. So I really appreciate your content personally. Um,
I
so
appreciate
uh,
that.
so keep on killing it. And I have two last questions I ask every guest, and the
Yep.
first one is, where can people find you?
Yeah, man. So social media at underdog AKH. I'm on YouTube, just Akeem Haynes. I actually have a new series on YouTube called Stress, which is an acronym, and it breaks down what every single letter means, and how we can all deal with stress. That has helped me. I still use to this day. And everything else, www.akeeminspires.com. You can find the podcast, which is unscripted, and all that there.
Yeah, I mean, stress is a interesting thing. I always feel like as athletes, a lot of times the times I'm most stressed that affect my performance is things off the track, and so it's
Mm.
super interesting to learn how to minimize that. Obviously, we're never gonna be fully stress free. At least I don't think we are. But my last question is, what do you want your impact to be on the world?
Man, so I believe that there is a word and a spirit that represents all of us, right? And whatever word that you think you represent, life is going to make you double down on that word. So for me, that word for me is perseverance, right? Perseverance is the ability to recover from a state or a condition with a positive attitude, enthusiastically um, rebound from it. Now, I want the spirit and the presence of hope. When people think about Akeem, they think about hope, right? I don't know what that looks like for anybody or what they may get from it, but hope for me, everything that I do, I believe that my story has perseverance and hope attached to it. And I don't want anybody to ever think that I'm perfect because I am far from perfect. I tell my young siblings all the time, I said, look, I'm not a role model because I don't play a role. I'm saying? Like, I'm a person that I'm flawed. I make mistakes. I have learning disabilities. Um, I have doubts like anybody else, but every single day I get up and I make a choice that I'm going to do something that speaks louder than my limitations, that society may say, all these different things. So the spirit of hope, man. And when people hear my story and they see Akeem, I want them to say, you know what? I may not know how I'm going to get through this, but if Akeem got through what he's going through and he's still smiling with a positive attitude, I know that I can get through what I'm going through. There's a reason why when we think about, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, that we still talk about them as if they're in the present, right? Because their presence is here. Whatever that makes you feel when their name is mentioned, you feel that and you talk about it as if they're sitting next to you. I want that same feeling. And so everything that I do, I just hope that I am representing everything um, of the word that I say that I think I am. So I hope that when people look at me, hear my story, that they believe that whatever it is that they're going through, may have been through, that they can still reach whatever it is that they think is possible for them, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's experience through life is different, but I love your experience and your version of what you've been through. And thank you so much for coming on my podcast. It was truly an honor to have you on.
Man, it's a pleasure, man. I love what you're doing, man. It's not everybody has the courage to put themselves out there, even it's when you're courageous enough, you can take that step, right? But what you've been through, man, just know that, man, you're a walking testimony of hope and how good God is, man, because this could be a different stage for you, man, but here you are today, bro. And I think that's something that we can never take for granted, man. You're a walking inspiration, man, and I hope you never forget that, man.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it and have a great rest of your day.
You as well too, man.
Thanks, man.